So welcome back, and today we get to talk about a new plant family that is also very important for people because people consume a lot of the plants from this family group. So just to remind you, last time we talked about the mint family or the Lamiaceae, and the mints or that family group provides us with a lot of the herbs and some of the spices, but mainly the herbs such as thyme, basil, oregano, and a bunch of other things, and some medicinal like the sages that have some medicinal properties, and obviously some that we can also eat for nutritional value, and that would be chia or basil seeds. And so today we get to cover the plant family that provides people with a lot of the vegetables. And so that's going to be the major importance of this family group. And so here we have what is referred to as tree uh, cabbage or tree kale, which is a popular uh, vegetable that it's been used and eaten by people. It has the advantage of having leaves that you can eat throughout the year, and it is a very popular vegetable that is now being grown here in Long Beach. And so we can look a little bit further back at the Brassicales, which is the order of this family group. And we're going to find a group of different plant families that they all have some kind of sulfur compound. And that is going to be important because it's going to give the plant some kind of peppery like taste to it. And so we have the Tropeliaceae, which is going to be the Nasturtium family or the Nasturtium. Several of them will fall under that category. We also have the Moringaceae, which is commonly known as moringa or horseradish tree, as is another common name. And then we have an obscure one. Here's the Caracaceae, which is the papaya family that falls under this category. And then we have the Caperaceae, which is the caper family that provides the caper that is used for eating. And then we have the Cleomiaceae or the Cleomi family. Before that used to be part of the Brassicaceae, and now its own family. And then we have the one that we get to talk about today, which is the Brassicaceae or the mustard cabbage radish family. It goes under by several different names. And so when we look at this family group, it is very, very successful. So it has colonized almost every part of the world. And there's a few characteristics that makes it suitable for doing just that. So we have it well represented throughout most of the world with a few exceptions. And so we have about 338 genera. We get to cover the most important ones and about 3,700 species. And we'll see a few of the ornamental ones as well as the ones that we can eat. And in the old family name, it used to be referred to as the cruciferi, which means cross bearing. And that is because members of these families will have a typical flower with four petals that are going to be opposite to each other, forming a cross. And so that is going to be a characteristic, one of the characteristics that you can use to identify members of this family. And so that it comes from the old family name and now the new one, which is Brassicaceae after Brassica or the mustard or the kale, the genus for kale or mustard. And so here is a typical flower cluster with several blossoms. And here's a yellow mustard flowers that you can see just that. We can see four petals kind of forming a cross. And here's a close-up of those. So we have the buds as well as the reproductive components of the flower. So when we look at the reproductive components, there's going to be a few other things that are going to be unique to this family group. One of them being that there is going to be six stamens. The stamens, which is the male component of the plant, made up of the anther and the filaments. And so four of those stamens are going to be tall. And then there's going to be two that are going to be short. And so here we have the one and the two shorter stamens, and then the four that are going to be taller. And this characteristic is goes or follows every member of this family. So if you have four petals forming a cross or a cross-like, then you have six stamens, four of them short, long, two of them short, then you know you're in the Brassicaceae or in the mustard family. And then you can see also for sepals that are going to be below the flowers. But four petals forming a cross, six stamens, four long, two short, you know you're in the Brassicaceae or the mustard family. And this is when we break the flower apart so that we can analyze its anatomy. So we see the petals, the sepals, and then we see the stigma, the style, and the ovary, which is the female component. And then we see the four large or tall stamens, and then the two that are going to be shorter right here. And I took away one here with the sepals. So that's going to be a cross section or the flower when you break it apart. And so pollination is going to be by primarily honeybees or insects. And that is going to be something very important that in California, we have now what is referred to as a fire season. And that is an annual cycle where there may be wildfires lingering out throughout the state. And that has to do in part with what I refer to as a human blunder, the introduction of a lot of the European mustards, as well as the African grasses that creates fuel for the fires to continue on for several miles. You add the dilemma that the honeybees are also going to be the main pollinators that allow for the mustards to create hundreds, if not thousands, of seeds that are deposited into the seed bag every single year. And so here we have the preferred plant flowers for the European honeybee, which is going to be the European mustard. Yes, they have a liking for the nectar from these flowers because those are the flowers that they evolve with. Later on, when they were brought into California, they both met again, and now the bee plays a major role in allowing some of these mustard plants to escape and continue on growing throughout the state of California. But we also have any other insects, such as this weevil. The flowers do not have a lot of specialization. They will welcome any insect that has just a very short mouth that can probe into the flowers and take the pollen and the nectar from within the flowers. As well as here's some wild flies that are pollinating some of the native mustards that you find around here in California. So we do have in California certain members of this family that are native, and so it would be some of these native insects that will be responsible for pollinating here in California, whereas where it would be the honeybee in Europe. And so here is a fly that you can see has a very long mouth part. So it's almost like a proboscis. And so it has no problem reaching deep within the flower to drink the nectar from. Uh, and so here's the beginning of the fruit. So pollination has to occur, fertilization will follow. And then you have the remnants of the stigma and the style, and now the ovary will begin to mature, and the ovules inside will become the seeds. On certain flowers or plants, the fruit may look like a heart, as in this individual right here, where we have the remnants of the stigma, and now we have the ovaries that are just a little bit flatter. And here's just a sampling of the different fruits of members of these families. So the fruit will be somewhat of a capsule or a capsule, and in many cases, it will split open upon maturity, allowing the seeds to be released. Sometimes the seed capsule may just break into pieces, and sometimes it's just going to fall off and be planted by itself. And so here we have a mature fruit, and you can see the individual seeds that will spread out. And so here is when the fruit is dry, and you break it up, and you can find a lot of seeds produced out of a single fruit, which is a problem with the mustards becoming an invasive plant here in California. The other thing that is important with this plant group is that it has an association with a butterfly. And so people who grow cabbage, people who grow cauliflower, people who grow broccoli, people who grow kale will often complain that some of the leaves have holes. And when you look very closely, you may find very, very tiny eggs. So I put a nickel for scale. So here is the egg of the butterfly. So when the butterflies are visiting the plant, they're not visiting for the flowers, they're visiting so that they can lay an egg that will then germinate into a caterpillar that is known as a looper, because as it walks, it creates a loop, and it is the caterpillar that will eat the leaves. This is the only type of food that the caterpillars can digest and they can eat. And so the butterflies will be on the lookout for members of this family to lay their eggs, and those will turn into the white sulfur or cabbage butterfly, which is very common around here in California because we grow a lot of the host food for the caterpillars. And here's just a few of the ornamentals that we may come across. The stock that is very popular. We have some plants that will have a very nice fragrance from the flower, and so this is the reason why they are grown. And many selections. So here's the selections where they kept changing and mutating, and now they have formed a multi-petal flower. Does not look with the four petals the typical structure, but it is a selection done by humans or by people. And here's a pink one that has the same thing. And then we have the sweet alyssum that is also very popular as far as ornamental. And when you look at them, the flowers are small, but get a closer look, and it follows the same uh, uh, equation for the flower. So four petals forming across, six long stamens in the center. Sorry, four long stamens in the center or tall stamens, two shorter ones on the side. And here's the multicolors that you may see are out there, including them being used in the landscape as a border type plant right there. And here's an even close up with a few other annual plants. And here is another one. Here's one with a skipper butterfly. So yes, butterflies can also visit. This one was going at a garden center, and I was able to photograph the skipper butterfly. Or we have certain ones that are going to be taller. These are wallflower in the genus Alyssum. And so here's the flower that is a typical for this family. Or we have candy tuft in the genus Iberis. Or we have Arabis here as an ornamental plant that is also being sold and available. Or we have here another Arabis. This one's being displayed at the Kew Botanic Garden, including this one's Malacomnia. So it would be in a botanic garden or somewhere else. Or here, more of an obscure genus, Descurania, also at Kew Botanic Garden, part of their collection, with a very ferny leaf and the flowers that follow the typical mustard family. Or here's cardamine, another from Kew Botanic Garden, part of their exhibit of interesting plants from different parts of the world. Or Dipilotaxis here, it's kind of dark, but here's the flower for that. And there's going to be some introductions. So here are some plants from the mustard family that you can find as sand dune plants. And so these are adapted for growing in sand. And sometimes, unfortunately, they have taken over some of the dunes or the disturbed dunes, which prevents a lot of the native dune plants from coming back and taking over. And so it is not uncommon. Here is Malibu Beach, where there's just common to see them growing in any beach area. If there's any kind of sand, you may be able to see them. It's kind of succulent, so it's able to survive that very dry climate, and it's also able to survive the salt or the salt spray from the ocean. And the flowers look like other members of this family. Or we have Lunaria, which is the moonflower, here being displayed at the Fullerton Arboretum. And here's the typical flowers for this, but it is known for having a very broad seeds that will turn white when matures, and people will use it as a dry flower arrangement. And so Lunaria, moonflower, would be the common name. And here is the seed being very large for this species. But beyond that, we have the most important component, which are going to be the edibles. So here we have an assortment of different edibles that you may find across most of the markets here in Southern California. And so we can see the genus Brassica. And here's Brassica Narinosa, which is the spoon uh, uh, mustard. And this is a relatively new introduction. It is becoming really popular because it has a very nice flavor. And not only does it look very nice for the ornamental gardens, but it's also edible. So the edible landscape would play a major role here. And so the leaves can be eaten. If the leaves do not get eaten, then the plants are going to bolt. And bolting for plants means that they are going to produce the flowers and then the seeds, and then the plant is going to die. For Long Beach, for us, most of this are going to be grown as cool season winter plants or cold loving. So Thanksgiving will be a great time to get them going, and they're going to be alive until we get some heat spell or we begin to get some high temperature that is going to force them to bolt, and then they'll die off. So here's that spoon mustard with its flowers, and the flowers, if you let them develop and you see them, it will follow the same pattern as the other brassicas with the 4 petals and the 6 stamens, 4 tall, 2 short. And then here's the Brassica nigra, which is the black mustard. And there has been many mustards that have been introduced into California and allowed to escape. There's many stories as to how they got here. There is no real record. May have been had multiple entries. People may have brought it in as a spice because this is where you get your mustard. But they come from a similar climate in Europe, and so it was very easy for them to colonize and take over certain areas around Southern California. And so it is not uncommon for people to see the mountains during the summer and they're going to be golden yellow, and that is because it's going to be completely covered with mustard plants. So here is Griffith Park, and they will come in very large numbers, and some of them can be quite tall. And so when they die, this is what's going to remain. And so we have the bodies and the stems of all the mustards. And for us, they're going to grow as an annual, which means that every single year, there's going to be new seeds that will sprout. They will grow very tall and then they'll die, leaving behind a lot of fuel for the fires. And so this is where the problem with the fire comes in, that year after year and after 10 years of these plants growing and accumulating, it provides a lot of fuels for the fires. And so this is the dilemma, and that is why we have the fire seasons here in California as a consequence of human blunders that have allowed this plant to escape and colonize the mountains and the hills. We have a few other native mustards here. So we see in the black mustard that is not a serious problem. But here we have cardamom. This one is a very tiny mustard. And even this tiny mustards will have no chance or very little chance competing with the more aggressive taller European mustards that are out there. So here's the seed pods and the flowers for this tiny mustard family member or Brassica. And here we have Drava, which is also a very tiny mustard. And so here's Cacile maritima. This one is the sand dune plant that you will see across. And here it was growing with the beach primrose in the sand dunes. And so here is a different view of that, including the flowers and the succulent leaves for this member of a sand dune member of the species. And here we have the Brassica. This would be the edible mustard, the collard greens, the mustard greens. That would be the one. When allowed to flower, it's going to have a nice yellow flower, such as what we see here. And here's the close-up of that. And that is going to be harvested for the mustard seeds. And the mustard seeds that are going to be part of the spices. It's a very old spice being consumed by humans for many, many years. And that is going to be then become the mustard or the ground mustard for making the Grey Poupon, or the mustard that is used by Americans to season their hot dogs and or other seasoning other foods. So mustard comes from the seeds out of this plant. And then we have many, many selections. And so we can take just the basic leafy mustard or brassica, and through the actions of humans, the selection pressure placed by humans and hybridization, and the plants have changed a lot. And so humans have selected them for their benefits. And so here we have Brassica oleracea, the variety capitata, which is going to be the ones that will form a head. And when we refer to as a head, it's going to be the cabbage, which is going to be a highly compressed plant. So the humans have selected it for being very compressed, very dense. And so it's going to create this big ball that is going to have a lot of leaves, some stems, and that's what people are going to eat. And so you have an assortment of several different cabbages that have been selected by people. We have the purple cabbage, the standard green cabbage, and also the red cabbages. Those are not wild plants, they're human selections. And here we have a few others, different types of cabbages that you may come across when you go to the markets, including the Savoy cabbage and the red cabbage or purple cabbage. And then we have another selection of Brassica oleracea, which is the one that produces clusters, and that's going to be the cauliflower. And the cauliflower is a selection for having very dense flower clusters. Before the flowers open, they are harvested and people will eat them. And so here's a cauliflower. When allowed to flower and is not consumed or harvested, then it's going to bolt and it's going to produce those golden yellow flowers that are typical of the plant family with all the characteristics of the flowers. Or it gets harvested and then it gets become available for the public to eat as a healthy vegetable. And here's a few other different types of broccoli or cauliflower, because there's been some hybridization between broccoli and or cauliflower. And now they have come up with a few other colors, including this broccoli romanesco, which is greenish in color. Or here is a different view. And here we have the broccoli, which is also in the same category, just with green flowers. And here's a fiesta flower, or sometimes referred to as the braca flower, orange cauliflower, just as a common name. And there's the close-up of that. Or the green cauliflower, so not all of them are going to be white, and the green ones will be better for you to eat. And so here's the white, that was just a selection. And there's the purple ones as well that are available. And there's the Chinese cauliflower, so not as dense, bigger, and still has all the tiny flower buds that get consumed before they open into the yellow flowers. So here's some of the Chinese cauliflower that are sometimes made into different soups or stews or sometimes eaten as a rice cauliflower for people who want to eat healthy. And here's where they sell it just like that. So the different cauliflower or pieces of the cauliflower. And then we have the Brassica oleracea italica, which is going to be the broccoli. Here's just the flower buds before they open. Once again, selection for being very, very condensed and very short growing. Flower stalks. Here's just a few of them comparing it with a cabbage. Here's those broccoli. And when allowed to flower, it'll have the yellow flowers that are typical of the plant. Uh, and here's Brassica oleracea, variety acephala, which is the flowering kale. Flowering kale, which is also edible, but a selection that is going to look like a flower. Here's the purple variety that is used for garnish or for decorating. And when the time comes, it will flower and it will have the golden yellow flowers that are typical of the group. And here it is being used in a container with several other plants surrounding it. And here's the flowers for that. And here's a garden bed loaded with mass planting of that flowering kale. And there's a different view of that. And then we have the tree kale. So this is one that is perennial and you can grow it here throughout the year and you can continue on harvesting your kale. Here's a small one that is the purple variety. So there's going to be many colors, different colors. So here's the roughly and the purple one. And here's one that you would find at the markets. Or here's just the plain leafy one that a lot of people would choose to make them into smoothies because they might not like the taste that is going to be very strong. Or here's some of the other kales, the greens and the purples, and those other ones. And even some color greens here, or dino kale. So there's now a variety and an assortment of kales that will become available or that are available for you to purchase if you're thinking about eating more vegetables. And here's the baby kales for your baby salads. And here's Brassica oleracea variety Geminifera, which is the Brussels sprouts. And Brussels sprouts was a selection for having dwarf or highly compressed lateral buds. And so when we have here is the stalk or the center stem that will grow tall, but all of the lateral buds that should have grown into branches are highly compressed. And so you have a baby cabbage because a cabbage is nothing more than this stalk being highly compressed. But the Brussels sprouts are going to be a popular one. So here is the node with the different lateral buds that have grown into that compressed stem, which is going to be the tiny cutesy Brussels sprout. And Brussels sprouts are going to either be a favorite or hated by many people. It all depends on whether or not you were forced to eat them when you were young, and or whether or not you have learned to accept the flavor that could be kind of strong. And once again, that is the sulfur compound found in them. And there's a purple Brussels sprouts. So here's Brassica oleracea, the variety longata, which is that tree kale that we talked about that is being grown throughout Long Beach. And here's some that could be quite tall, so taller than a house. So this would be some of the largest ones that you can find around here and harvesting leaves throughout the year. Or here we have Brassica oleracea variety longata, which is the kohlrabi. And now we have a selection for a very thick stem. So the roots are below, the leaves are kind of scattered. And so the kohlrabi is a very thick stem that has a nice crispy flavor to it. If you've never had it, you should try it. So here's where they're selling the stem. They cut the leaves and the roots are also gone. And so this is where people will chop them and saute them and then eat them as a vegetable. And there it is with my hand for scale. Or a few of the more wild broccoli. Here's Brassica oleracea variety alboglabra, which is going to be the broccolini. And this is a more of an older style. Or sometimes there's going to be the Chinese broccoli, which is going to be known as gailan, which is available in some of the stores. So those are older selections that are not as highly compressed as the regular broccoli that most Americans would know. So the broccolini or the gailan, which are available. And there's going to be several of the yo choy or bok choy that you may find out there. Here's spigarella broccoli, so kind of roughly. And or here's another type of broccoli or mustard there for with leafy greens. So this is broccoli brave or rob. And here's another of those broccolini type broccolini. And or we have Brassica rapa variety chinensis, and this is the bok choy. The bok choy that is now a selection for the leaves. So the leaf and the petioles are eaten if allowed to flower, has the typical flowers. And so we have the petiole, which is white, and the blade of the leaf, which is the green, that is consumed by people, does not have that unpleasant flavor or strong flavor of some of the other broccolis or mustards or cabbages. And so that's why it is sometimes preferred by people. And so here's a few different forms that are available in some of the markets, including some with the flowers that are also edible. So it's going to be several of the baby bok choys that you can purchase, or regular bok choys, or gai choy here, which is a lot bigger, or large gai choy, which is even bigger. So many selections, different choices out there depending on which market you go to, or sweet bok choy here that you can see available as well, or Taiwanese bok choy here, and our Brassica rapa variety pekinensis, and this is going to be known as the Napa cabbage. So now we have a cabbage that is very popular. So here for scale, and then here's the long Napa, which is allowed to stretch a little and become soft, and that's going to be the main ingredient for the kimchi. So if you ever had kimchi, which is a Korean product or origin, it has cabbage, and that's going to be the Napa cabbage. And here's a few other selections that are out there in case you want to try something different. This one is the Taiwanese cabbage, or Brassica rapa variety rapa, which is going to be the turnips. So we have the turnip, which is a selection for the stem. The roots are going to be below. And then we have those in the stores. And those can also be grown for the seeds. So the oils, there's going to be a high amount of oils found in the seeds of some of these mustards. And so those are the oils that get extracted, and they are going to become what is known as the canola oil. So that's what we have here. And if you look at the picture, you will also see a nice mustard flower with all the components here. So, and then when people took the turnips and they crossed it with a cabbage because they're closely related, so they can be hybridized, then they got a rutabaga. And the rutabaga is a hybrid of the two. It does not have the same flavor or kind of radish flavor as the turnips. And so some people prefer the rutabaga flavor to the others. So this is Brassica Brassica as the new name for this hybrid. And so here is the turnips and the rutabaga so that you can see the difference of the two. And then we have the genus Rabanus, which is the different types of radishes that are going to be out there. This is the wild radish that was brought over, and it's now escaped, and it's growing as weeds in many areas because we no longer have value for it. In the old days, the greens could be eaten, flowers could be eaten, the fruit could be eaten, and it has the radish flavor. But as new introductions, as other radishes became available, this wild radish, as its common name is, lost popularity and now it's no longer cultivated and it's just growing as weeds. And so here's the flowers for a radish, typical flower for radish with all the characteristics of the family. And here's the seed pod that can be eaten when it's green and it tastes just like radish. But from there, there has been many, many selections. So here is a radish that has been selected for having very long taproot. And here's the flowers or the plant with flowers, and there's how you would find it in the stores. So this is the flower for this, and so we're talking about the Daikon radish that is very popular as a stir fry vegetable for vegetable or for soups or many many more uses. It does not have that very strong radish flavor, so when mixed with other ingredients it can become quite a good vegetable if you want to try it. So the Napa radish has a very very important value for people, and there's some of the larger ones that you may come across. And even the leaves on the radish are still eaten. So here's the daikon leaves as they are sold in the market. So you don't have to throw them away. Eat the roots, eat the leaves, eat the entire plant, even the flowers. They're all good for you, and you should be eating a lot more. And we have even green radishes that are available that you can eat. So here's a green daikon, not as long as the other ones. And there's also some of the greens for this one as well. And here's a close-up of those. Or we have more of the French or Italian radishes. This will be the cute button radish that are popular because they're not too big and you can just take a bite off of them. Some of them could be quite sweet, some of them could be very strong, and there's going to be many selections of those. Here's a different radish in purple and a lot larger that you may find in the market. And here's a few more that you can go out there. And so here's a photograph of four different radishes, very large, just for scale, so that you can add them to your regular diet and be a lot healthier. Here's the watermelon radish. So selections for being very colorful. So when you cut them in half, it looks like a rainbow inside. And here we have the black radish that you can also eat. It's not black inside, but just the outside has a dark pigment. And so here's that one. And or the radish sprouts. So they take a bunch of seeds and germinate them, and now you can add them to your sandwiches as a nice splash of health and goodness for and flavor for a sandwich. So there's the radish seeds and the sprouts. And then we have our more racia, which is very popular horseradish. And so here is when it was flowering, we grew it here several years ago. And so here's the flowers that follow the typical member of this family. And this is the roots of the horseradish that is popular for the prime rib or popular for other as a spice. So here it is mixed with some of the other radishes in the store. So the horseradish being in the center. And here's a few more with some rhubarb and the celery. And so you have also in the kimchi, they might have some of this as a vegetable, but most important would be that horseradish for flavoring some of the food, which obviously I do not favor, but that's all right. And then we have something similar, which is the wasabi, that unfortunately the one that you get here in the stores or in the Chinese Japanese restaurants is not the real wasabi. This is just a wasabi-like plant. It comes from a horseradish that you may add to your piece as well, or some of your other mustard greens. So obviously it's used in a lot of other flavors. A few other individuals that are edible in case somebody wants to forage. We have the shepherd's purse. So every part of the plant is edible, including the seed pods. and there's the flowers when you see them. Or we have the Nasturtium Officinalis, which is the watercress, and it is native to California and it's native to other parts of the world. It's kind of like a water plant or an aquatic plant. So if you're out there hiking by rivers, you will see it growing. It does have a peppery flavor to it, but it's edible. And here it is when it was available at some of the supermarkets around here. And here it is when it's grown hydroponically for you to use and eat. Or here's Euruca sativa when I allow it to flower uh, in the garden. And here's where you have the leaves that are used in salads, and it does provide, again, peppery flavor if you like that. Uh, so that's great. And here's the flowers for this plant. Or we have the genus Arabidopsis. And Arabidopsis, though I have not grown it, I need to grow it at some point, does have some importance to it because Arabidopsis was the first plant and the type plant for a lot of the genomes. So it was the very first plant to have its entire genome mapped out. And a lot of the genetically engineer or genetic engineer and a lot of the genetic work that has now taken over the entire plant community started with Arabidopsis. And so that's why it became very, very important. So when they finally mapped it and they were able to go with that work, and everybody else has followed and used Arabidopsis as the type specimen for when they started doing some work. And so, yes, Arabidopsis, we can owe the genetic work, some plants, and all of those name changes to plants and the new families and the old families to Arabidopsis. Or we can also thank the mustards for the mustard gas. And the mustard gas that comes out of that. As an accident, it was discovered that if it comes in contact with some of the human cells, that it would begin to melt them. And so it was a nitrogen mustard that causes that. But what we owe to this mistake or experiment is the fact that chemotherapy started with an accident. So somebody got in contact with a gas, and then somebody else figured out if they can somehow use this to on cancerous cells, what effect would it have? And so that became the beginning of chemotherapy that later on advanced even more. And now many people who have survived cancer has been done through the thanks of the chemotherapies that had their beginning with a mustard plant or mustard gas. And so we have a lot of thanks to this family, not only for some medicinal treatments or cancer treatments, as well as the genetics, but most important, the food that we consume, the vegetables that more people should be eating them, that are good and healthy for you to eat, from the broccoli and everything else to some of the pickle material that you may see out there, because it's going to be very popular depending on which market you go, and the different cultures that are out there. So they'll have a selection and a preference for some of those plants. So here's just an assortment of different products from different markets, different pickled material, plant material that you can definitely eat if you want to try something different. Or dehydrate it so that then you can add water, rehydrate it, and then use it, or save it for using throughout the year so that it doesn't spoil. And so make sure that you never forget to eat your salad because they are very good for you. There's a lot of vitamins and minerals, and there's also a lot of other very, very important compounds that are going to make you healthy. So, with that, I thank you, and I'll see you next time.